Now, if you want to become a police officer, there's a number of very important things that you have to follow. Especially today in the current climate, the police can afford to pick whoever they want to, so they can afford to go for the best candidates. Therefore, your application and how you put yourself across at the assessment centre and the interview is very important indeed. The first stage is obviously you need to make an application, so you'll submit your application, and this is where probably 75% of people fall at this very first hurdle. Many people complete the application form without either reading it, without finding out exactly what is required, and also failing to demonstrate the key core competencies that are required to become a police officer. And whilst on the subject of core competencies, when you're completing the application form, make sure you first of all understand the core competencies, you know exactly what they are, and you also provide evidence of where you match the core competencies on every question during the application form. Now, the way that I would recommend you do that is that you sit down, read the core competencies, and take keywords and phrases from each core competency and place them into your responses on the application form. You should also make sure that you follow every single instruction on the application form and also on the guidance notes. So if it says to you that you need to complete the form in a certain colour ink, make sure you do. Don't give the police any excuse for putting your form in the bin. So treat the application form stage as basically a sifting process, but make sure you spend plenty of time in completing the form correctly. Once you've successfully passed the application form stage, you'll then need to go on to an assessment centre where you'll be required to carry out a number of written tests, a number of interactive exercises, and also an interview. Again, it's very important that you understand the core competencies, because this is essentially how you will be assessed during the assessment centre. So if we take for a second and think about the kind of work that a police officer, or he or she, would do in their day-to-day work, as you can imagine, they'd be required to write written, concise notes. So effective communication is very important. So like me, I use a computer all the time, but if I ask myself the question, how often do I actually write with a pen and use a piece of paper? It's not very often nowadays. So when you go to the assessment centre, you're going to be required to write a concise and effective written report. So if you're not used to writing, I'd suggest that you start practicing that using sample written report exercises, because that carries quite a lot of marks at the assessment centre. So if the assessor looks at your report and they can't read it, or it's full of grammar and spelling mistakes, then you're not going to pass that part of the selection process. So make sure you take your time to prepare for that. Also, moving on to the role play exercises, there are a number of really important tips that you can use when preparing for the role plays. I'll give you an example of one. You should be able to demonstrate really good customer service. At no point should you become angry during the role play or interactive exercises, because if you were speaking to a police officer, how would you expect them to come back at you? You would not expect them to be aggressive in any manner. So if we take a scenario where a police officer turns up to a pub and there's an incident occurring involving, say, a group of men, and there's a fight going on, you would not expect the police officer to go jumping in and start fighting him or herself. You would expect them to be totally calm and to be able to maintain a level of respect and deal with the people in a calm and effective manner. So that's basically what the role play is designed to ask you to do, is to be able to demonstrate the core competencies. So make sure you read them, understand them, and have the ability to demonstrate them at every single stage. You'll also be required to sit an interview, which will be an assessment centre interview. Now, many police forces have brought in what is called a final interview. The final interview is at a different stage, and it is different to the assessment centre interview. So at the assessment centre interview, you'll be required to demonstrate, again, the key core competencies. And there will generally be 4 questions, and it will ask you to provide a situation of where you have demonstrated something which is relevant to the core competencies. And I always recommend students use what I call the STAR method when responding to the questions, which is formulate your responses by situation, task, action and result. So what is the situation that you were involved in? What task had to be done by you and other people? What action specifically did you take, and what action did other people take? And also, what was the result as a result of your actions? And try and make sure that the result is positive. So that's how I kind of get people to teach to use their responses to construct them. So when you go to the assessment centre, you've got in your mind exactly what it is that you want to say. So preparation is key. You've got to make sure that you prepare yourself fully for every stage of the process, because as I said at the beginning, you know, the police can choose whoever they want. They can really take the cream of the crop, and you have to make sure that you put yourself right at the top of the pile.